Hi everyone, today we're going to be making the stunning Daniela dress. Daniela has a plunging neckline on both the front and back, making it absolutely gorgeous. It's cut on bias, which gives it the perfect flowiness. This sewing pattern comes in 10 different sizes, and it's not recommended for beginners. You can find this and many more patterns on our website or on Etsy, so make sure to get your pattern. Here's a list of everything you need to sew this pattern, and remember that the fabric amount depends on the size you're going to be making. We first have to print the pattern. In my case, I printed the US letter format pattern, but you could also use the A0 and A4 format. You can decide whether you want to print all of the sizes or only one, like I'm going to show you. First, you need to open Adobe Acrobat, which is free, so you can always download that if you want. And once you open the document, you'll see on the right edge, you're going to see all of these little icons. When clicking the last one, you'll notice you have all of the layers of the patterns, and you can just turn on or off any layer you want. In my case, I'm using size 36, so I'm turning all of the layers of all the sizes off except 36. And you'll notice you'll only be able to see the size you want. Now that you have printed your pattern, it's time to assemble it. Remember, the layout depends on the format you're using. Since I'm using the US letter format, it's going to be a little different from the A0 and A4 format, so always keep that in mind. On the first page, you'll see all of the sizes and its lines in different colors in case you printed it out in more than one size. On the second page, you'll find your size charts, the photo of the finished garment, and the corresponding layout to your format. We're going to begin by assembling the first row. On the top of each page, you'll find a letter and a number. The number depends on the row you're going to be working on. So this is number 1, and that's why you'll see a 1 next to each layer. Each page also has a margin with markings, so you can match up each page perfectly. For the first row, we're going to begin by cutting the left edge of every paper on the first row. Once you've done that, you can start gluing or taping. In my case, I'm going to be using some tape. And you're going to match the markings on the edges of the paper until you finish the first row. From the second to the last row, you're going to start by cutting the left edge, but also the top edge of the paper. And you're going to tape it the same way you did with the first row. And you're going to repeat that until you finish all of the rows. Now, using the pattern layout as an example, you're going to start attaching all of the rows together. In my case, the US format looks like this. And now you can go ahead and cut all of the pattern pieces. So you should have a front bodice panel, a front skirt panel, a back skirt panel, and a back bodice panel. And also a strap panel. For this dress, I'm going to be using a baby blue silk fabric, so let's start cutting the fabric. All of the pieces on this pattern are cut on bias, so you always have to make sure that the grain line of each pattern piece matches up with the grain line of the fabric. How you lay out the pattern pieces on the fabric also depends on the size you're using. This is a layout I came up with for size 36. As you can see, all of the grain lines match the grain line of the fabric. You can either pin the pattern piece to the fabric or use pattern weights as I did. This is a delicate fabric, so sometimes it's better to use any pattern weights you have, and then you can move on to cutting. Once you've cut all of your fabric, you're going to transfer the notches from each pattern piece onto the fabric. For the back bodice, we have 3 notches. For the front skirt, we have 2 notches. The same for the back skirt. And we have to transfer the darts from the front bodice. I like cutting the darts and then marking them with some fabric markers or pencil. Make sure you're transferring or marking the darts on the wrong side of the fabric, not the right side. It's time to sew. The first thing we're going to do is close all 4 darts of the front bodice panel. Make sure the wrong side of the fabric is facing you when you're closing the darts, just like this. And you're going to sew a straight line. Once you've closed all 4 darts, make sure to press them facing down. On the same front bodice panel, we're going to overcast or finish with a zigzag stitch the edge of the facing. Then you're going to fold it about 1 centimeter towards the wrong side of the fabric and stitch again, this time with a straight stitch. Now we're going to fold the front bodice at the neckline fold. So line the right sides of the fabric together and you're going to sew the armholes, leaving a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And make sure to align the darts. Next, we have to flip this inside out, but first we're going to cut some notches on the seam allowance, making sure not to cut the thread. This will help the turning look a lot nicer. And make sure to give it a good press. To prepare the straps, you're going to fold the long edges of the straps inward at about 0.7 centimeters, and then we're going to fold it in the middle. This way, we're going to straight stitch from one side to the other, leaving us with straps like this. Before we attach the straps, we have to cut about 5 centimeters from the end of each strap. Grab those straps and attach them at the waistline of the front bodice panel. Remember, we have notches that tell us where to pin them. Now with the longer straps, you're going to attach them to the shoulders. So just place them right in the middle like this and pin. We're going to secure all 4 of these with a straight stitch. Now you're going to sew over the facing and on top of the loop again on each side. This is just to secure the facing in place. Now also grab your front skirt panel and we're going to attach it to the front bodice. So just place them right sides together and straight stitch, leaving a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Remember to also overcast or use a zigzag stitch to finish the raw edges. Now you can just press the seam allowance downwards. Grab your back bodice panel, and we're also going to finish the edge of the facing with a zigzag stitch. Fold the edge 1 centimeter towards the wrong side of the fabric and sew. Now you're going to fold the panel at the neckline fold, making sure the right side of the fabric is together, and you're going to sew the armholes, leaving a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Remember, we also have to make some notches here before we can flip it inside out. Make sure to give it a good press. Grab your back skirt panel and attach it to the back bodice panel. So remember, straight stitch leaving a 1 centimeter seam allowance and a overcast stitch or a zigzag stitch. Now we're going to move on to the necklines of the dress. Using steam from your iron, you're going to heat up the neckline and start stretching it a little bit to help shape it nicely. You can see I'm not pressing down with my iron, I'm just using the steam. If you have one, you could also use a dress form for this step, just like this. You're going to do this for both front and back necklines. With your front panel on the table, you're going to face the back side on top of the front panel, making sure both of the right sides are facing each other. Use the notches on the sides to align them properly. You're going to start pinning from the top of one of the sides all the way to the hem. But make sure to separate the back facing, so we're not going to be stitching over the back facing. Remember to use a straight stitch while leaving a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And you're going to do that for both sides of the dress. Next, you're going to bend the back facing onto the front neckline, while making sure it aligns with the front facing. It should look something like this, and you're going to sew that closed, leaving a 1 centimeter seam allowance. You'll know you have sewn it correctly because when you flip it inside out, you can clearly see the shape of the arm side. Flip it back again, and now we have to overcast or finish with a zigzag seam all of the raw edges on both sides. It's time to sew the shoulders together. As you can see, both the front and back shoulders have a side where there's a seam and the other side is unfold, or the neckline, and you're going to guide that front piece into the back piece. When it's time to pin, make sure that the side that has a seam lines with the other side that also has a seam. I like to flip it inside out before I actually sew, so I know I'm going to be sewing properly. You'll know you've pinned it correctly because you can clearly see the entire armhole. So now that you've made sure, flip it inside out again, and now it's time to stitch. And finally, last but not least, we're going to hem the dress. To do so, I decided to overcast or zigzag stitch the edge and then fold it 1 centimeter upwards and sew a straight stitch. But you could also do a double rolled hem or whatever hem you prefer. Don't forget to give it a final good press, and now your Daniela dress is completely ready.